let there be trees. That's when the trees came into existence. Um, and it's interesting that the Tu B'Shvat always falls out in Parshas B'Shalach, which is when Hashem split the sea. So it's interesting that, just like in Bereshis, Hashem, so to speak, split the sea, a dry land appeared, and that's when the trees appear for the first time. It's interesting that Tu B'Shvat always falls out, Parshas B'Shalach, when there's a Kriyas. So interesting. Okay, so I want to talk about a little bit about Ilan, about a tree, what its significance is, why we celebrate Tu B'Shvat. It's interesting also that I think Kedusha Levi points out that the gematria, the numerical value of Ilan, is equal to that of Shvat. All right. Now, if you do the math, you say, even quick glance says, no way, it doesn't make sense. Shvat has a shin which is 300, and a base, and a test, and 2 and a 9 is 311, and Ilan, at best, is Aleph is 1, Yud is, a Lamed is 30, a Yud is 10, and Nun is 50. So that's not even close. But if you branch out the tree, which means you spell out with the word Ilan, the letter Aleph is spelled Aleph Lamed Pei, Aleph, right? And then the Yud is spelled Yud Vav Daled, that's another word gematria. And the Lamed is Lamed Mem Daled, and Nun is Nun Vav Nun. If you add it all up, it actually equals to exactly that which Ilan is, all right? So somehow there is a connection between Ilan and Shvat. There's a connection between Ilan and Parshas B'Shalach, and what is the significance in general of what are we celebrating Tu B'Shvat? Chazal tell us that, and I want to talk about Ilan in general as well. Chazal tell us that the saraf, the lack of a better word, the sap, climbs through the tree and begins to make its way through the tree during Shvat, during the Tu B'Shvat. Interesting, the word saraf probably is the same English word as syrup, probably the same idea that sap or syrup is going up. So what is significant about that? Why is that important? Why are we celebrating that? In a sense, we start the year with an Elul. It's a very intense Elul, punctuated by a really inspiring Rosh Hashanah, and then again introspection and a Yom Kippur of cleansing. And then you celebrate with the Sukkos, and that kind of is the exclamation point with end with a high with Sukkos. And then perhaps that high carries over for the next month or so, and maybe you make it to Hanukkah, and Hanukkah kind of like becomes that final piece of the Yom Tov cycle. But then you head for the dead of winter, and in the dead of winter things appear dormant, lifeless, and even our own ruchnius. While we're involved with the Yom Tovim, there's a certain excitement that gets us moving and energetic. And now we're feeling kind of in no man's land. Sukkot is way behind us, even Hanukkah, and Pesach's not quite around the corner. And you kind of feel that you're doing all this work, but what are you producing? But just like the saraf, when you look at the trees now, they don't look full of life. It's not spring. You don't get the sense of spring. You looks like dead trees, basically, right? Trees without any life to them, certainly. And yet, Chazal tells us you're making a mistake. While on the outside, it looks like nothing's happening, but on the inside, that sarv is climbing the tree and getting ready for the blossom season. So to our own avoda, yes, now we're digging in and we have to work hard, and we don't have all the highlights of the Yom Tovim to help us. But understand, in our own personal lives, the sarv is also so to speak rising within us, and it's going to blossom in the Pesach season as well. So the parallel is there because, as I should have mentioned, that the Torah tells us, Adam Eitz Hasada, a man is compared to a tree in the field. And so when we celebrate Tu B'Shvat, we're also celebrating mankind and what the man represents vis-a-vis the tree. So I want to talk about that in particular. We just talked about one parallel. Tu B'Shvat is when the saraf rises, and then within us the same thing happens. But let's mention two or three points. One is that some Sfarim talk about that the fruit that we eat on Tasar B'Shvat is supposed to be a rectification of that original sin of Adam and Eve when they ate from that tree. They weren't supposed to eat from that tree. And then somehow there's a parallel or a tikkun for that sin. What's going on? First of all, anybody know what was the first commandment that Hashem gave Adam? Anybody know?
Be fruitful and multiply.
Be fruitful and multiply. Okay, so that's not really accurate. According to most, that's understood as a blessing. There wasn't a commandment then. It was a blessing. Don't eat from the tree of knowledge, right? So that's what everybody says, and everyone makes the exact same mistake. It's not really accurate. But it's a mistake that we all make because the Yetzer Hara wants to make that mistake. the first thing Hashem says, I'm putting the Garden of Eden, and I want you to enjoy all the fruits of the garden.
Eat everything.
Just don't eat from this one tree. But what did you hear? Was everybody here? No, you can't eat from the garden, right? That's what we hear. We hear we hear the restriction. The fact that the Torah begins, the halal, the Shalom Aleichem, Adam Rishon is, the Shalom Aleichem Yiddishkeit of Judaism is, I want you to enjoy. That's somehow the Nachash convinces us, no, you can't have that tree, right? And that's all we hear. Because we hear the restriction, and that's what we resent, and we bristle at. But the first command was to go and enjoy the garden that I put you in.
Is that counted among the...
Sorry?
What's the first one counted among the 613?
That's not one of the 613. That's one given Adam. That's not one given, no. But what is that? What's the lesson behind that? It's true that Hashem wants us to enjoy, but more than Hashem wants us to enjoy, because Hashem is a native. But ultimately, Hashem is saying, the way you get close to me is by getting pleasure, but by connecting that pleasure to me, and that's the ultimate pleasure. In other words, you can either have pleasure or be a receiver of pleasure. If you have pleasure, then it's just about you having pleasure. If you see yourself as a recipient of pleasure, that means you're aware of the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God wants you to have this pleasure. And what does that do when you become aware that, wow, Hashem wants me to have pleasure? That makes you closer to Him. So the actual eating and getting enjoyment actually brings you close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. See, Adam didn't think that way. Adam said, you know what? If I want pleasure, I can't be connected to God. I have to somehow be independent of God. I don't associate pleasure with Hashem, right? I associate it with, subservience and everything else, but where's the pleasure? So if I want pleasure, I gotta assert my independence. So I'm not eating. I'm eating from the tree you told me not to eat from. I'm asserting my independence. And Hashem's saying, no. You want pleasure? That's the wrong way of doing it. The real way of pleasure is by connecting to me. You'll get pleasure. Because if you become aware of the fact that I'm giving this fruit, you eat a fruit and you're aware of the taste and the health of it. And you think of all the nutrients and everything Hashem put in just for you, it creates a bond. It creates a special relation. Wow, you did this all for me. That's what it's supposed to involve. And so whereas Adam severed his relationship with Hashem because he was looking for pleasure, we say just the opposite. If you want pleasure, it's by embracing pleasure, but seeing that and being aware that you're the recipient of pleasure. And that will allow you to feel closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But that was his mistake. So we eat from the tree, we make a bracha, and that allows us to feel close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem wants us to feel pleasure. And we feel, wow, Hashem, you created this and me so I can feel pleasure? You did it all for me? That makes you feel close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the eating experience gets you close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Not like many religions think that is my physical existence, my spiritual existence, and never shall the twains meet. No. Hashem is saying, enjoy this world. I want you to enjoy it. And if you're aware of it that I want you to enjoy it, you'll get closer to me by that act of enjoyment as well. So really, in a sense, the tikkun is to really eat the fruit, make that bracha. I think I once told you a story. It won't be the first time I probably repeat the story, but of Rishol Salanter. Somebody once asked Rishol Salanter, how come, every bracha, is very specific to a particular food. I have a french fry, borei pri ha'adama, fruit of the ground. I have a fruit, borei pri ha'etz. Makes sense. Yet when it comes to a simple glass of water, shahakol miyabadvar, everything came into being through his words. Why this grandiose blessing for a simple glass of water? Shul says, you know what? That's a great question. I need to think about it. I think one answer would be, and I don't know if Shul Santer, I'm sure he thought of it, he wanted to come up with a different answer. I think part of it might be that we know water is a source of all existence. So when you say Shahakal Libivar, it's recognition that the water really is a secret for life anywhere, right? We know that, and anytime they're looking for life in any other planet, the first thing they look for is any signs of water, because without that we can't exist. So it could be that Chazal understood there's a connection between water and everything that came into existence. Certainly true. But Shlomo did not give that answer, and he said, "Oh, let me think about it." Fast forward a few months later, he's sitting in a restaurant. He has a meeting with a number of people. At the end of the meal, they give each person the bill. They give him a bill. It says 20 francs or $20. He said, "Oh, you must be mistaken." They go, "Why are you mistaken?" He said, "Well, I didn't have the meal. Everybody had the meal. I just had a glass of water." So we're not making a mistake. So he said, "What do you mean? It's just a simple glass of water." He said, "Rabbi, this is not a simple glass of water." So what do you mean? He said, "First of all, didn't we serve it in a beautiful crystal glass?" I said, "It's true. And isn't it a beautiful linen that you're sitting on the tablecloth? And don't we have flowers on this tablecloth to make it really nice?" And isn't this table overlooking the water? And it's true. And don't we have a violinist playing in the background? I said, yeah. So it's not a simple glass of water. He said, you're absolutely right. Thank you very much. And he ran home and he wrote a student, I have your answer. Chazal wanted us to be aware when you even drink just a simple glass of water, if you engage all your senses, you're with friends, you're under a blue sky, or whatever the case may be, and you bring that all into the picture, it enhances the pleasure of the drinking. Shahakol, think about everything as you're drinking this glass of water and enhance it. And that's what Hashem wants. Hashem wants us to get the pleasure. But as long as we realize that we're the recipients of pleasure, we're not just having the pleasure, then it connects us further to Hashem, and that becomes the tikkun for eating from that tree. Okay, so now we spoke about the eating as general as a tikkun, and that's why it's also important to eat properly too. If you want to really feel the pleasure. So I have my wife's grandfather was a very holy Jew. And I guarantee you never had mismanners for a couple of reasons. First of all, he didn't speak English, and second of all, because I had no interest in him. But it was interesting that when he drank soup, he always brought the soup spoon to his lips rather than bow his head to the bowl, as Miss Manners will probably tell you. Now, she has her own reasons, perhaps, but he always said, I'm not a horse. A horse sticks a head in a trough. I don't do that. I'm bringing the food to me. I'm not bowing to the food. And in a sense, it was a dignified form of eating. But when you eat in a dignified manner and you're still able to experience the pleasure Hashem gave you, it all creates that experience of an intense pleasure. That Hashem gives you food and you can eat it in a dignified manner, not like an animal that pounces on the food. That is part of the pleasurable experience, and that really is what the tikkun, what the pri is. But let's just take the analogy a little further. Adam Eitzah, man is like a tree of the field. So I want to use that analogy. What we're celebrating the trees on Tubshevat, but we're really celebrating about ourselves because we're compared to that tree. So let's learn a little bit about trees. So the human being is compared to a tree. Why? Because a tree produces fruits, and our job in life is to produce fruits. Produce. We're supposed to be producers. Now we live in a society that really teaches the opposite. It's all about being a consumer, right? Every marketing is about consume this. It's not about produce this, produce that. It's about consume. Everyone wants to get you to be a consumer, when in life you really should be a producer. It's not about taking more of yourself. It's about being creative. There's no greater pleasure than being creative and producing fruits. So, the idea is to produce fruits, right? That's what we're here for. But even though, by the way, it's very interesting. In the English language, if you want to talk about a tree that bears fruit, you say a fruit-bearing tree. In Hebrew, Lashon Kodesh, if you want to say fruit-bearing tree, you say Ilan, tree. If you want to say it's non-bearing, you say Ilan Sarak. In other words, you use the adjective to describe the tree when it's not fruit-bearing. In other words, the default position of a tree is it should produce fruit. That's what a tree is supposed to be. It's interesting in the English language, no, we have an adjective to pile on to the word tree, fruit-bearing. No, that's not. The essence of a tree is to produce fruit. So the word Elon by itself means fruit-producing. If you want to say it's a tree that doesn't produce fruit, you have to describe it. No, it's a non-fruit-producing tree. Otherwise, Stam Elon is fruit-bearing, because that's what a tree is supposed to be, and that's what we're supposed to be. We're supposed to always be producers. But, I think Sfasemis, others say, we're really an inverted tree. A tree has its roots in the ground and produces fruits upwards. We're the opposite. We're rooted in Shemayim. Our roots, we get our nourishment from Shemayim, and then we produce fruits in this world. It's the reverse. It's not coincidence, by the way, that when you put on your tefillin, you're actually connecting to Shemayim. In fact, the tefillin sharosh has a shin on one side, yeah, a shin on the other, and you put it on top of your rosh, top of your head. Now, the letter that represents the head is the letter resh and rosh, right? So you have a shin, resh, shin, which spells shoresh, which means roots. Because you're putting this tefillin sharosh is rooting you. And by it's not a coincidence, the letter shin actually looks like roots. Right. Because what you're doing is you're actually rooting yourself in Shemayim, and this is your shoresh. Your shoresh is in Shemayim, that's what you're putting on the tefillin, and you're producing fruit in this world. So we are fruit-bearing, producing fruit, but only when we connect to Shemayim. If we don't connect to Shemayim, we can't produce fruit. Sorry?
I missed something. What's the shin on the box?
You have a shin on either side of the box, right? Don't you have a letter shin?
Okay.
No, one of them is not a shin.
It's a shin. It's a shin with four. That's a different.
It's four.
But it's a shin. it's a letter shin. The question of why he has four, that's a different story. It's a shin. It's definitely letter shin. Absolute letter shin. Okay?
Shin, shin, or
Shin, shin, ray. Shin.
All these years, I've never noticed.
There you go. All right. Shin, ray, shin. Absolutely. All right. So that's the idea of producing fruit, but we're plugged in Shemayim producing fruit. And what are the fruit that we produce? So we know in Parshas Noach it says Elu Toldos Noach, Noach Sadik Tambei Deresav. So Rashi's bothered by the fact that here are the children of Noach, and doesn't mention their children. The next passage talks about Shem, Cham, and Yafes. So Rashi says, you know why? Because the Toldos of a tzaddik are his Maisim Tovim. So Elu Toldos Noach is Tzaddik Tamei Deresav. That was his Toldos. His Toldos were that he was a Tzaddik Tamei Deresav. That was his fruit. Was it his Maisim Tovim? So the Maisim Tovim of a Tzaddik are his fruit. Those are his Toldos, so to speak, right? So Sfas Emes asks a great question. He said, understand, only a Tzaddik has Maisim Tovim? A Russia doesn't have Maisim Tovim? What is it? The Maisim Tovim of Tzaddik, those are his fruit. And if Russia doesn't have Maisim Tovim, Russia can have Maisim Tovim. He says, yes, but they're not his Toldos. What does that mean? It's a beautiful insight. He says, when you see bump, he doesn't say this, but you see bumper stickers say, do random acts of kindness. That's not a Torah concept. It's not like a random act. Now, by the way, there's nothing wrong to do a random act of kindness, but that's not what you want to do. You want to be a producer of kindness, meaning it comes from yourself outward. It's like you're constantly producing more Maisim Tovim. A Russia can do acts of kindness, but they're random acts of kindness. They're not really, he's not giving birth to them. They're not coming from his inner self. He's just doing a random act of kindness. But it's not something he's producing. It's not coming from his inner self. A tzaddik, his whole essence is he's a producer. He's a producer of Maisim Tovim. A Russia can do Maisim Tovim, but they're not his toldos. They're not his fruit, so to speak. It's not something it's coming from within. It's not an extension of himself, so to speak. Our fruits are an extension of ourselves. Okay, that's another idea behind. Oh, that makes us soda. But let's talk about the tree. So Chazal tell us about a tree. The Chazal say that if a person's chachma is merubah ma'asav, the person's wisdom is greater than his actions, then his actions won't remain. And Mishnah used the example of a tree that has more branches than roots. If you have more branches, that means you have more chachma than you have masim, and such a tree will get toppled over by a wind. Okay. So the idea is that you need to do masim. You need to have masim, good deeds, and those become the roots. So I want to. It's a nice thought, certainly, but I really heard it the strongest when this happened to me a number of years ago. We moved to our home, and we had decided we would extend the kitchen out. It was getting too small, and that meant pushing out where the deck was. We wanted to have a little deck, so we wanted to push the deck where the kitchen was, but there was a tree there. Now, it wasn't a fruit-bearing tree, so it wasn't really luckily a problem, but it was a nice tree, and we didn't feel it was the right thing. We didn't want to do that, so we're trying to figure out, build around it, do this. I told my wife, maybe they have people that remove trees. I don't know, maybe they're tree removers. She said, no, don't be ridiculous. I said, well, those days had something called the Yellow Pages, right? You actually took out a big fat book, which I mentioned to the guy. He said my kids had no clothes on. Right? In fact, I looked through the Yellow Pages. You know, today everything is. My granddaughter, she a few weeks ago, her teacher mentioned something about Moshe Rabbeinu, and she mentioned the Torah that the Torah says we don't know where Moshe Rabbeinu was buried ad hayom. She was so confused. She goes, I don't understand. Why don't you just ask Siri? That was it. And she made it so natural. She was trying to, right? Today's like, what do you mean? Right? Okay. Anyway, but the bottom line is that we called them up and sure enough, I looked at the Yellow Page. There's something called tree removers. Okay, great. So I called them up and said, could you remove my trees? They said, sure. They said, well, is it a big tree or a small tree? I said, well, what's a big tree or a small tree? He goes, well, it's like this. If you measure from the ground 18 inches, and then you measure the circumference of that trunk. If it's less than 12 inches, or I think that's number 14 inches, that's a small tree. Any more, that's called a big tree. Okay, so I go 18 inches around, I do my thing. It's less than 14, it's a small tree. Oh, good, that's a small tree, it's a little easier to do. Okay, now I have to ask one more question. How much space do you have between your house and the house next door to you? I said, why? She said, because we need to bring the machinery in to pull the tree out of the ground. And I said, oh, plenty of room. I mean, you said, well, you know, you need a machine, but it's a small tree. So you don't understand, the machine that we need to pull out the tree of the ground, which is a small tree, is 1.5 times the size of the cement mixers you see on the road. That's how big the machine is. That's so. If you're a rabbi, you have this sickness, which is okay. How does this turn into a sermon, right? That's right. That's right. So to me, the obvious answer was here's this little tree supposedly, because from above ground it doesn't look so big. But imagine the root system below, how entrenched it is. That you need a machine the size of a cement mixer and a half to lift it out of the ground. So what does it tell us about the power of roots? So Chazal say that a person needs to have a tree that has roots in the ground through Ma'asim Tovim. We appreciate what Ma'asim Tovim do. The Ma'asim Tovim create the roots so we don't budge. But that's the key to success are those roots, which is the Ma'asim Tovim. So again, with the tree of the ground, we produce fruit, but we have to have rooted ourselves in the Ma'asim Tovim. And one last thing I'll mention about trees, and that is, there's another mission of us that talks about trees. And it says a person is learning Torah, and he's mafsik mishnasai, and he stops learning, and he says, "Ma no ilonza, look how beautiful this tree is." Mischayi benafsho, he should forfeit his life. Pretty strong language. Think about it. What's he doing wrong? He's marveling the beauty of Hashem's trees. So the key is again, Chazal always careful the words I use. It says you're learning Torah and you're mafsik mishnasai, which means you stop the learning, which means if you see your marveling of the tree as stopping from connecting to Hashem learning, that's the problem, Chai Benafsho. If you're learning and you say, okay, now I'm taking a time out and I'm marveling the tree of nature, but it has nothing to do with my connection to Hashem, that's the problem. When you're mafsik mishnasai, when you see this as severing what you're doing. If you see it as an extension of what you're doing, you're learning Torah, and then you marvel at the tree, and you say, look what Hashem gave me in this world, that's beautiful. But if you're mafsik mishnasai, if you see it as a hefsik, you see it as an interruption of what you're doing, that's Mischai Benafshay. So, the Adam Eitz HaSoda is certainly something we take to heart, that's our role, to be an Elon, which by definition means fruit-bearing. That's the adjective is only the other way around, and the fruit are a ma'asim tovim, which for tzaddik means it becomes a natural extension of who we are, and requires roots, and those are the ma'asim tovim as well. And then we talked about the idea that Adam chose not to eat from the tree that Hashem chose to eat from the tree Hashem said not to, because somehow he thought by asserting his independence he'll get pleasure. But he didn't associate pleasure necessarily with being connected to Hashem. Something you have to do, but that's where the pleasure comes from. And fakir, the tikkun is we're going to eat a fruit from Eretz tree from fruit from Eretz Yisrael, which is given the highest priority, and that is the ultimate pleasure. And not only the ultimate pleasure, it connects us to our Kadosh Baruch Hu. If you think about Hashem as the one giving us this pleasure, and there's no greater joy that Hashem has in giving us pleasure. When we eat that fruit and we say, Hashem's getting such pleasure in that He's giving us pleasure, what does it do for our relationship with Him? It really makes that connection. So one can enjoy and should enjoy pleasure of the fruits of the tree, but ultimately it really enhances our relationship, not envisioned, and so we do that tikkun by eating the fruit. I'll just conclude before we dive Meir, the Bnei Yissaschar, my great-great-great-grandfather always pointed out that tomorrow night around Tubshevat is a good time to daven for a good esrog, for a beautiful esrog. Tubshevat, that's the moment you daven to Hashem. If you want a good fruit for esrog, this is the appropriate time. Everything has its appropriate time. So Tubshevat is a time we daven for beautiful esrog, to do hiddur mitzvah, and have that opportunity as well. We'll stop here for Meir, and then we'll pick it up.
One quick